All right, I've drawn my my little reference table for the first quadrant of the unit circle using the same memorization trick we've worked with. But so to talk about sine of 5 pi over 6, let's draw our circle. Okay, at pi over 6, we know what sine is equal to. It's 1/2. So let me do a better circle here. So what is the y value at pi over 6? It's 1/2, right? So then 5 pi over 6, if this is 6 pi over 6, aka pi, 1 pi over 6 slice less than that will take us to 5 pi over 6. And we can see that the y value at 5 pi over 6 is exactly the same as it is at pi over 6, right? So all we have to do here is you don't have to do that circle I just drew. You just have to say, okay, I know 5 pi over 6 is in quadrant 2. And I know sine is positive in quadrant 2. And I know with a pi over 6 reference angle, sine is 1/2. So sine of 5 pi over 6 must also be 1/2. Okay. Cosine of 17 pi over 6, again, just have to determine what quadrant I'm in. So this is 6 pi over 6, 12 pi over 6, 18 pi over 6. So 17 pi over 6 would be up here. And cosine is negative in that quadrant. And then we know that cosine of pi over 6 is equal to root 3 over 2. So cosine of 17 pi over 6 must be equal to negative root 3 over 2. Okay, tangent of 10 pi over 3 is going to be equal to sine of 10 pi over 3 divided by cosine of 10 pi over 3. Okay, so again, let's figure out what quadrant we're in. Okay, this is 3 pi over 3, 6 pi over 3, 9 pi over 3, 10 pi over 3 is down here in the third quadrant, where all students take, tangent is positive down here, because both sine and cosine are negative, so when you divide the negatives, it's going to be positive. So now we just need to remember sine of pi over 3 is root 3 over 2, and cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2. Okay, so we'll say our answer should be equal to root 3 over 2 over 1/2, which is just going to simplify to root 3. Okay. And again, technically sine of 10 pi over 3, cosine of 10 pi over 3 are both negative they're in the third quadrant, but those negatives cancel to make a positive, right? Tangent's positive in the third quadrant. So positive root 3. Okay, 13 pi over 4, again, this is going to be sine of 13 pi over 4 divided by cosine of 13 pi over 4. Let's figure out our quadrants. Okay, so we have 4 pi over 4, 8 pi over 4, 12 pi over 4, so 13 pi over 4 is in quadrant 3 again, where we already know tangent is positive. And good thing here is that the pi over 4 reference angle, sine and cosine are both the same. So when you divide them, they just cancel out to give you a result of 1. Okay, dividing something by itself gives you a result of 1. Secant of 4 pi over 3 is going to be the same as cosine of 4 pi over 3, but flipped. So let's figure out what quadrant we're in. 0 pi over 3, 3 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3 is down here in the third quadrant where we know cosine's negative. And then remember that cosine of pi over 3 is equal to 1/2. So our answer here then should just be negative 1/2. So then what I mean when I say secant is cosine flipped, secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So if cosine represents adjacent over hypotenuse, secant represents hypotenuse over adjacent. So we just have to flip these. So it's negative 2 over 1, which is just negative 2. Last, cosecant 7 pi over 4, what quadrant, well, first of all, this is going to be sine of 7 pi over 4 flipped. So first of all, what quadrant are we in? Okay, 4 pi over 4, 8 pi over 4, so 7 pi over 4 would drop us down here, where sine is negative, and it's equal to negative root 2 over 2. So then cosecant is just going to be that flipped, negative 2 over root 2, which we can simplify, or not simplify, but rewrite as negative 2 root 2 over 2, which then the 2's cancel and we get negative root 2. Final answer. Okay, so that's it.